Right now, basically your entire financial life, your bank account, your medical records, the whole global financial system, it's all protected by a math problem.
Yeah, a really, really complex one.
Exactly. A problem so vast that, it would take a normal computer millions of years to solve. So you feel secure.
Right. Because you think time is on your side.
Right. But there is a very specific type of machine being built today that can solve that exact problem. I mean, probably before you even finish listening to this deep dive.
Which, honestly, completely reframes how we have to look at digital security. I mean, my background is in cybersecurity, and we are just so used to thinking about hackers like breaking in through a side door.
Right, like phishing scams or whatever.
Exactly. We rarely stop to consider what happens when the actual structural foundation of the vault just vaporizes.
Which is a terrifying thought. So welcome to today's deep dive. I'm coming at this from the perspective of a financial tech and macroeconomics analyst, and our mission today is to explore a massive, highly urgent shift happening right now in global finance.
Yeah, we're unpacking a really detailed architectural breakdown that we got our hands on.
Right, and this source material compares our legacy financial networks, what it calls the traditional rails, to a next-generation decentralized network known as Cellframe L0.
It's a fascinating side-by-side comparison, because the hard technical reality is that the math holding the old system together, it literally has an expiration date.
It does, and I can tell you, the macroeconomic implications here are just staggering. We are talking about ripping out and replacing the plumbing of the entire world economy.
Yeah, but before we get to the macroeconomics, we kind of have to understand that ticking clock.
Right. Let's start with a mathematical threat. The breakdown takes direct aim at what it calls classical cryptography, and it lists these acronyms: ECDSA, RSA, and ECC. What exactly are these invisible shields we're relying on?
Okay, so RSA, elliptic curve cryptography, and the ECDSA signature algorithm. These are basically the protocols that secure practically every single digital transaction you make today.
Okay.
And they all rely on the sheer difficulty of prime factorization.
Which means what, in plain English?
Well, simply put, it is incredibly easy for a computer to, multiply two massive prime numbers together. But it is overwhelmingly difficult for a classical computer to look at that massive final number and work backward to figure out what the two original prime numbers were.
Because a classical computer basically has to guess and check, right? Like it has to try every single combination, one by one.
Yeah, exactly. Which would take thousands or even millions of years.
Okay, so that's why we feel safe. And let me jump in here with an analogy because I think this helps visualize it. If traditional cryptography is like hiding a specific grain of sand on a vast, endless beach.
Right.
It would take a classical computer millions of years to sift through all that sand to find it. But this quantum threat we're talking about, Shor's algorithm, it isn't just a faster way of sifting sand, is it?
No, not at all.
It's like waving a massive magnet over the beach that just instantly pulls out that exact specific grain of sand.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Because a quantum computer running Shor's algorithm doesn't guess faster. It uses quantum mechanics to basically zero in on the right answer instantly while canceling out all the wrong ones.
The magnet just pulls it right up.
Exactly. And the architectural analysis we're looking at highlights that traditional rails are entirely vulnerable to this. It's not a possibility, it's a structural inevitability.
Okay, so the magnet is coming. How do we build a beach where the magnet doesn't work?
Well, that's where the source details this quantum-safe infrastructure. And it specifically points to Cellframe L0 as the alternative, noting it uses 3 types of post-quantum cryptography.
Right, I've got the list here. It says it's lattice-based, hash-based, and ZK-friendly, which means zero-knowledge proofs. So translate those defenses for me. Let's start with lattice-based.
Sure. So instead of hiding your data behind the multiplication of prime numbers, which is exactly what Shor's algorithm is designed to break, lattice-based crypto hides the data within incredibly complex multidimensional geometric grids.
Wait, multidimensional grids?
Yeah, imagine a grid with hundreds of dimensions.
Okay, my brain is already hurting.
Right, and that's the point. Even with your massive quantum magnet, a quantum computer has no mathematical shortcut to find the specific shortest point-to-point vector in that crazy geometry. It simply gets lost.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're changing the game entirely from prime numbers to geometry. What about the hash-based layers?
Think of a hash function as a mathematical blender.
A blender, I like that.
You put a piece of data in, turn it on, and it spits out a completely unrecognizable string of characters.
Yeah.
You can't unblend a smoothie to get your original strawberry back.
Right, it's a one-way street.
Exactly. Hash-based signatures use these one-way functions to verify authenticity, and even a quantum computer can't easily reverse a highly complex one-way cryptographic hash.
Got it. Which brings us to the third one, the ZK-friendly part, zero-knowledge proofs. I feel like I see this popping up everywhere in fintech right now.
Oh, absolutely, because they solve a massive privacy issue. Basically, a zero-knowledge proof allows one party to prove to another party that they have a specific piece of information without actually revealing the information itself.
It's like a bouncer at a club, right?
Yeah.
You need to prove you're over 21. Instead of handing over your ID and showing the bouncer your home address, your full name, and your exact birthday.
Yeah, you don't want to give them all that.
Right. So a zero-knowledge proof acts like a digital system that just flashes a green check mark to the bouncer. It proves the condition is met without exposing the underlying sensitive data.
That's spot on. And Cellframe L0 is specifically built to be ZK-friendly, meaning its underlying architecture naturally supports those kinds of proofs while remaining quantum resistant. The core takeaway from the source here is that these three layers working together provide resistance to quantum attacks right now.
Today, not in some distant sci-fi future.
Exactly. Today.
Yeah. Which, honestly, pushes us past the math and straight into the geopolitical reality. Because if the foundational mathematics securing the world's money are broken, the very next logical question any nation-state has to ask is, well, who controls the servers that the money is currently traveling on?
And that transition from mathematical vulnerability to political centralization is a huge theme in the analysis.
It's the sovereignty aspect. The documentation stresses that legacy finance isn't just technologically outdated. It's completely reliant on Western-controlled financial systems. It explicitly points the finger at SWIFT, correspondent banking networks, and major card networks.
No, and we need to be really clear here. We have to look at this strictly as an architectural feature, right? Independent of foreign policy debates or taking sides.
Absolutely. We're just impartially reporting what the source lays out.
Right. And the simple engineering reality laid out here is that legacy systems are highly centralized. They operate as choke points. When you have a central switchboard, whoever operates that switchboard holds the power to disconnect participants.
Right.
By definition, that subjects anyone using the network to potential sanctions, censorship, or political leverage.
I want to dig into how that actually works mechanically, because I think people often misunderstand SWIFT. SWIFT doesn't actually move money.
No, it doesn't.
It's a messaging system. It's basically like a highly secure WhatsApp for banks. If a bank in Brazil wants to send $1 billion to a bank in India, they don't load cash onto a plane. They use SWIFT to send a standardized message to a correspondent bank, usually some central hub in New York or London, telling them to adjust their mutual ledgers.
And that mutual ledger relies entirely on trust in that central hub. If the operator of that correspondent bank or the operator of the SWIFT messaging system itself just decides to block your message,
your money doesn't move.
Exactly. Your assets are effectively frozen purely because of where the network architecture is physically and legally located.
Yeah. And again, we aren't here to take a stance on whether specific global sanctions are right or wrong, but we have to acknowledge the mechanical reality of the system. Centralized control equals immense leverage.
It does.
Which explains a massive geopolitical shift highlighted in the breakdown. It notes that the BRICS nations and the Global South are actively seeking quantum-safe infrastructure to build entirely independent payment rails.
And when you look at the scale of that, you are talking about half the world's population and a massive portion of global GDP. They are recognizing that reliance on a centralized legacy system is a critical vulnerability.
Now, this is a debate I hear constantly in macroeconomic circles, and I want your take on it based on the architecture we're reviewing. Is a shift to a network like Cellframe L0 primarily a defensive move? Like, are nations just trying to build a sanction-dodging backdoor? Or is it fundamentally about what the source calls economic self-determination and policy independence?
Well, based on the structural design detailed in the source, it is fundamentally the latter. I mean, defensive moves are usually just reactive patches.
Yeah, quick fixes.
But building independent, quantum-safe payment rails from the ground up. That is proactive infrastructure development. True financial sovereignty requires a network that is strictly mathematically neutral.
Because if it's not neutral, you're just swapping one boss for another.
Exactly. You can't achieve self-determination if you just build a slightly different version of Swift and hand the central keys to a different superpower. To get true neutrality, you have to remove the central switchboard entirely.
You literally cannot copy and paste the old architecture. You need a fundamentally different foundation, which bridges us perfectly into how this thing is actually built. The analysis contrasts the two infrastructures directly, pitting the single points of failure in traditional systems against Selframe's decentralized layer 0 architecture.
Right, and let's define what a layer 0 actually is, because it's critical to understanding the shift. Think of layer 1 blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum as individual cities.
Okay, cities.
Each city has its own rules, its own economy, its own boundaries. A layer 0 is the foundational highway system that sits beneath all of them. It provides the root infrastructure and interoperability protocols that allow all those different cities to communicate and transfer values seamlessly.
Okay, I see the logic of the highway system, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
When my clients in traditional institutional finance hear the word decentralized, they don't think of robust highways. They think of wild, highly volatile crypto casinos. They think of networks that completely lack oversight. So are global superpowers and major institutions really going to trust sovereign wealth to a decentralized layer 0?
That is the standard pushback from legacy finance, absolutely. But the architectural breakdown counters it by defining decentralization not as a lack of rules, but as an engineering choice for ultimate uptime. The documentation explicitly defines Selframe's layer 0 as having high resilience, fault tolerance, and continuous availability.
Okay, so walk me through how it actually achieves that fault tolerance. What does that look like?
Well, in a centralized system, if a major cloud provider goes down, or say a central bank server farm loses power,
which happens. We see airline systems and banking apps go down all the time.
All the time. Thousands of transactions are just stalled. But in a properly decentralized layer 0, the network is maintained by thousands of independent nodes distributed globally. So if one node, or even an entire region of servers goes offline, the network just automatically routes around the damage. It doesn't even blink.
So it's literally about eliminating the single point of failure.
Precisely. And the source further validates this by explicitly stating that Selframe L0 is optimized for banking, government, and institutional grade use cases. I mean, this is not built for speculative token trading. It is built to be the bedrock for heavy-hitting financial instruments.
Right, which makes sense when you look at the use cases the source expands on. He points out that legacy finance suffers from slow innovation, high cost, and limited accessibility. I mean, let's look at cross-border payments on traditional rails. It can take days to settle a transaction across borders, with multiple correspondent banks taking a fee at every single step.
It's incredibly inefficient.
Completely. In contrast, this new architecture is designed to scale for massive things like trade finance and central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
And running a CBDC requires a completely different level of infrastructural integrity. Because the central bank digital currency isn't just a fun digital coin. It is the literal digital representation of a sovereign nation's fiat economy.
Right, you cannot run a digital US dollar or a digital Chinese yuan or an Indian rupee on an infrastructure that requires, scheduled maintenance downtime.
No, you can't.
And you certainly can't run it on an outdated cryptographic standard that a quantum computer could crack in an afternoon.
Which brings us to the most pressing question of this entire deep dive, the timeline. We've established what the post-quantum technology is and why the geopolitical landscape is actively hungry for mathematically neutral systems. But why the urgency? Why is this a crisis for today rather than a slow transition we can just sort of manage over the next 2 decades?
Because technology moves faster than bureaucracy. And the documentation has a dedicated section titled Why It Matters Now, and it issues a very blunt warning. It explicitly states, as quantum computing advances, today's cryptography risks becoming tomorrow's liability.
Tomorrow's liability is a systems engineering nightmare. I mean, the immense challenge with cryptography is the sheer inertia of global networks. Transitioning a massive financial grid from classical to post-quantum cryptography takes years, sometimes a full decade of testing, deployment, and auditing.
So you really have to build the bunker long before the tornado is visible on the horizon.
Yes. Because you cannot wait until a major tech company or a rival nation-state announces they have successfully built a fault-tolerant, Shor's-capable quantum computer.
By then, it's too late.
Exactly. On the exact day that announcement is made, if you are still running your nation's economy on the old rails, your entire historical ledger, all your secure diplomatic communications, and all your sovereign wealth stored digitally are instantly compromised. The source warns that traditional systems will require incredibly disruptive upgrades or just complete overhauls if they delay.
Which brings us to the massive breaking news catalyst hidden in this architectural breakdown. Because this isn't just a theoretical white paper exercise, right? The document highlights a real-world, immediate macroeconomic application. It explicitly states that Cellframe is actively preparing to enter the selection process for BRICS' independent payment infrastructure.
And that data point really grounds everything we've talked about into a current event. The BRICS nations aren't just philosophizing about sovereignty, they are actively evaluating the underlying architecture for a tangible, massive-scale rollout.
Wow.
They're looking for the exact combination of decentralized resilience and quantum-safe cryptography that we've just unpacked.
A new financial era is literally being built. That is the overarching theme the architectural analysis leaves us with. It's a real-time shift from dependence to independence, from legacy to longevity.
And critically, a shift from structurally vulnerable to quantum safe. The choices being made by these major economic blocs right now are quite literally writing the rulebook for the next century of global trade.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? Let's take a quick step back and look at the whole picture. We started with the very real mathematical threat of Shor's algorithm, the quantum magnet sweeping over the beach that secures the world's assets. We unpacked the geopolitical realities of SWIFT, explaining how centralized messaging creates central choke points and leverage for sanctions. And we explored how the Global South and BRICS nations are actively evaluating decentralized quantum-safe networks like Cellframe L0 to build a mathematically neutral, highly resilient financial system.
Yeah, and we have spent this entire session focused on sovereign wealth, central banks, and the architecture of global trade. But when we zoom out and look at the systemic shift happening, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the foundational math securing international trade and global superpowers is quietly being ripped out and replaced under our noses to prepare for a post-quantum world, what other secure systems in your daily life are already living on borrowed time? From the private medical records sitting on your local hospital server to the digital identity you use to access your entire life, are they just waiting for the quantum era to arrive, trusting locks that are destined to vanish overnight?
Oof. It definitely forces you to look differently at every single password prompt and every secure network you log into. The ground beneath our digital lives is shifting. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.